Hello everyone, you are on the F Recap channel, and today we will tell you about the 2018 movie, Green Book. Everything begins with introducing one of the main characters, Tony the Lip, who works as a bouncer in one of the most prestigious nightclubs in New York. He notices that the head of a gangster group enters the club. There are dress code rules in the club, and the man has to leave his hat, but he threatens that if anything happens to it, he will burn down the whole building. Tony immediately asks the coat check girl to give the hat back to him for a couple of bucks and a smile. The gangster is furious when he finds out that the hat has gone missing. He gives 1 day to find it, after which the club will be destroyed. The club owner has to close the establishment until the problem is resolved. But there's nothing to worry about because it's part of Tony's plan. He goes to the gangsters and returns the hat, saying that he already dealt with the thief. The gang leader sees Tony as a hero and gives him some money. After work, Tony returns home, where his wife Dolores and 2 children await him. The next day, the faucet breaks, and they have to call plumbers, who turn out to be black. As soon as they leave, Tony throws away everything they touched. Dolores doesn't like such behavior. The film shows how, in those times, people were distrustful of black people. Tony's friends share the same principles as him. As for the club, it has some financial issues and remains closed. From this day on, Tony is unemployed. He participates in various bets, like who can eat more hot dogs, with significant money at stake. However, he still needs to find a proper job, especially with Christmas approaching. One day, his friend offers him a job as a chauffeur for a famous pianist, Doc Shirley. Tony immediately agrees, but he is surprised when a black man shows up. Doc plans an 8-week tour across America. For this, he needs someone who can plan the route and take care of his belongings for a salary of $100 a week. At that time, it was a very large sum, but Tony refuses because he is a man of principles. However, when Doc raises the salary to $125, Tony promises to think about it by tomorrow. Around this time, Tony receives an offer to work for the mafia, but he politely declines, realizing that if something happens, who will take care of his family? He ends up pawning his watch, as his family is experiencing financial difficulties. Therefore, the tour with Shirley will help improve their situation a little. Evening, Tony tells his wife about the strange offer he received from the black pianist. He thinks it's ridiculous. How can he work as a chauffeur for $125? It makes no sense to him. The next morning, the phone rings and Tony asks Dolores to decline Dr. Shirley's offer, saying that he has already found another job. However, his wife politely accepts the offer instead, much to Tony's frustration and disappointment. Before the journey begins, Tony receives the car keys and the Green Book, a guide listing places where black people are allowed to stay. From the start of the tour, the relationship between Tony and Doc is complicated. Doc insists on certain rules: no smoking or eating in the car. Tony, who initially disliked black people, starts to feel irritated. At first, the relationship between Tony and Doc is difficult, but by nightfall, the duo arrives in Pittsburgh, where Doc performs for white citizens. Listening to his performance, Tony is amazed that a black person can play the piano so well. In a new venue, Tony notices that the piano is of poor quality and not the right brand, and he asks for it to be replaced. The worker refuses, arguing that such a piano is good enough for black people. Tony immediately punches him, and the worker is forced to replace the instrument. After the show, the duo heads to the next city. On the way, Tony wonders why Doc plays for white people when they look down on him. At some point, Tony offers Doc a piece of fried chicken, saying, "Everyone knows black people love chicken." Doc initially refuses, arguing that it's just a stereotype. But seeing Tony's persistence, he takes a piece and finds that he really enjoys the taste of the fried chicken. The next day, the white audience welcomes Doc warmly, but when he wants to use the bathroom, the committee refuses, directing him to a special outhouse in the yard. This humiliates Doc, and he asks Tony to take him back to the hotel, where he can use the bathroom in privacy. When they return to the show, Doc acts as if nothing happened. Tony doesn't understand why Doc tolerates this. "If they sent me to an outdoor toilet, I'd piss on their living room floor," Tony says to another musician. Later, another musician tells Tony that this is not the first humiliation Doc has faced, and that Tony should be prepared for constant racism. The musician also mentions that Doc could perform elsewhere, and earn 3 times as much, but Tony cannot understand why Doc chose this tour. During the tour, Tony and Doc begin to grow closer. One day, after seeing a letter Tony wrote to his wife, Doc tells him that if he truly loves a woman, he should write her a beautiful, romantic letter. He then helps Tony compose a heartfelt letter to Dolores, which moves her deeply. Gradually, Tony starts to change, realizing that his prejudices were wrong. He also sees that despite his successful career, Doc is lonely. One evening, Doc decides to go to a local bar alone to unwind. However, the locals do not like his presence and start provoking him. The situation escalates quickly, and a fight breaks out. Tony finds out that Doc went to the bar alone and arrives just in time to intervene, saving Doc from the attackers. He pulls him out of the bar and convinces him not to go to such places alone, emphasizing that they are a team on this tour and must support each other. One day, Tony meets some acquaintances on the street who saw him working for a black man. To prevent Tony from dirtying his hands, they offer him another job, but Tony politely refuses. Later that evening, a friend calls Tony to ask him to come down to a bar, but Doc assumes Tony is planning to leave him, so he offers to raise Tony's salary. Tony is adamantly against it. He promised to complete this tour. After returning from the bar, Tony suggests they sit in the hotel lobby for a while, where Doc shares his story of becoming a famous pianist. One day when he was playing the piano, a white pianist liked his performance and arranged for him to work in a recording studio. Tony suggests that Doc should try playing something else, perhaps jazz, but still thinks Doc's classical playing is phenomenal. These words make Doc happy, but he is bound by a contract to play classical music. On the way to their next concert, their car is stopped by the police. Tony hit the police officer because he said that in their state, monkeys aren't allowed to walk around after midnight. At the police station, Doc demands an explanation, and when he doesn't get one, he threatens to sue unless he is allowed to call his lawyer. A few minutes later, the police chief answers the phone and is visibly worried. Tony wants to know who Doc called, but Doc replies that due to Tony's actions, he had to call the president's brother. An argument breaks out between them. Doc lives in a fancy house, but everyone hates him. He feels like a dog entertaining white people, which is why even black people don't want to associate with him. Tony has no answer, but he realizes that no matter how wealthy a black person is, their life is still much harder. The next day, they arrive at their final destination. Once again, Doc is treated with disdain. The manager assigns him a place to perform, but when Doc wants to join 2 other musicians in the restaurant, a waiter tries to throw him out. Tony tries to explain that there is nothing wrong with Doc eating with others, but the manager refuses. Tony declares that if Doc is not allowed to dine with the others, he will cancel the concert. The manager asks to speak with Tony privately, arguing that letting a black man eat in the restaurant is like giving a monkey a banana on a golden plate. Tony is filled with rage, but Doc stops him. Doc agrees to play if Tony wants him to, but Tony decides that Doc shouldn't have to endure such treatment, and they leave. On their way home, they stop by a black establishment, where a waitress asks why they are dressed alike. Tony explains that the person sitting next to him is a real star, and although they were supposed to perform in a fancy venue, they decided to stop by here because the food is so good. The waitress hints that they have a piano, and if Doc plays, the meal will be on the house. Doc agrees and plays, feeling truly happy for the first time in a long while. On their way back, a snowstorm hits. It is Christmas Eve. Tony tries to find accommodations for Doc, but Doc refuses, knowing Tony should be home with his family. Tony then offers to bring him home. Doc, aware that he is black and Tony's family might feel uncomfortable, declines and leaves. Sitting alone in an empty room, he remembers Tony's words, that Doc has a choice and can do whatever he wants. In the midst of the celebration, Tony hears a knock at the door. It's Doc. Tony proudly introduces his friend, and to Tony's surprise, his entire family welcomes Doc warmly. They are convinced that Doc is a wonderful person since he managed to change Tony for the better. Dolores embraces Doc and thanks him for helping Tony write letters to her. The film ends with a few facts about the real-life Dr. Shirley. Thank you for watching F Recap. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment on what you think about the film. See you next time.